Good morning. We'll start the session by sharp 11. Good morning. Thank you for joining this morning. Quite a few people joined, so we'll wait for a minute or two. We'll plan to start by sharp 11. Okay, it's 11 a.m. now. I think we can get started. Okay, good morning, everybody. A warm welcome to One and All. It's our pleasure to see so many new faces as well as those who already attended on our previous sessions. So, hope you are good. Hope you are all good with the prerequisites. That is the Python development part one. So, how many of you have attended our last session or at least watched those sessions on YouTube channel? For those who missed our first session, it is always there in our YouTube channel, Obscura Zone. Please feel free to watch our first session because it's a continuation of our session number one. For those who missed the first session, let me give a quick overview or quick walkthrough through the topics that we discussed in our first session. As every programming language, we started with a hello world program, then the different data types, and then we moved on to operators, the arithmetic and comparison operators, and then we moved into different data structures like arrays, list, dictionary, etc. After that, the auxiliary functions and conditional statements. The last topic we discussed was loops. That session is there in our YouTube channel. You can watch it anytime that you want. Even we had given homeworks, basically three programs. Hope you all got outputs for those three programs. So are we good to proceed? Okay, let's move on. Now Shan will take you through the rest of the sessions. Hey Shan, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And a very good morning to all our audience. And already John has given you a recap of what we did on the last session. And so without further waiting, let's see what's in for us today. So we will start off from where we left on the day one. And I believe we discussed only the for loop. So let's start with what is actually a simple introduction of a while loop. Nothing much there. Then we will come to like a few of the other supported functionalities by Python, which will be very useful in your future programming, like unpacking list and tuples, zip and enumerate collections. And then we will see another unique feature of Python that is called comprehension. Then we will go to the methods, that is basically the functions. Then we'll see how our classes implemented in Python. Then again, one more missed topic from last session, that is the file handling. Then we might also talk about the modules and basically the Python package index, which is basically the repository for the Python modules. And we don't worry about the topics which we have listed here. We will go as the same pace as last time so that everybody can get their hands on. Because there is no point in actually learning so much unless you understand that. So let's focus on learning whatever we are learning thoroughly. Okay, so don't worry about the how much you are seeing here. We will go slowly. Okay, so let's start with a practical first today. Instead of just watching the slide, I think that will be a good start. Then we'll come back to slides one by one for the topics. Okay, so is everybody already have opened their PyCharm in their laptops and ready to start? Can I see some responses, please? Okay. So let's start by creating a new file or a new Python file itself, let's say. And let's start with, let's say, our first topic, that is a while loop. So I'm creating a file. So I believe everybody are aware of how to create a Python file. So, and today's most of our exercises we will try to do in our Python file itself instead of the shell because it will be useful for your future reference as well. I see somebody is using Spider. I don't think there will be any issue, but yeah, you have to, the features which I'm showing might not be available there. Okay. Let me increase the font size a bit. Okay. Since we are starting a new file, so let's start about something which we have missed during the last session. That is basically commenting. Okay. So for example, I said like author, and this line I want to comment it. Okay. So there are the easiest way to comment is a hash sign. So if you put a hash sign, it is a single line comment. Okay. Now, if you want a multi-line comment or a block line comment, it's always easier to use something called as a double triple quote or a single triple quote. So that's like this, or like this. Okay. Now, this is so if you put like a however you call it, like a triple double quote or triple single quote, if you put like anything inside, it encapsulates everything. So anything you write, multi-line or anything, it is inside this. For example, let's say okay. So this is how you comment. Now, this same syntax is also applicable for a string assignment. That means I can also do x equal to like this. Okay, and I can print x. So it won't show you any error. So this is also a way where you can represent a string. It's not like just a double quotes or single quotes. Now usage like this also encapsulate everything inside. So all your even if you can put your single quote or double quote here like this, it encapsulates and it won't give you any error. Also, you don't have to use any escape keywords. Okay. Are we good here? Any doubts on the comments? Okay. So I believe everybody are now familiar with the while loop, right? For loop, right? So today we are starting with a while loop. So while loop is like basically good with a where you don't know the range or your end condition is not concrete or defined. Okay. So let's take an example. Okay. So I'm saying my variable like a equal to 10. Okay. And I want to increment every time, and whenever it reaches any point, I want to exit the loop. Okay. So the syntax is pretty simple. It's while and a condition. Okay. So condition can be like I can say it's a valid condition. So the loop will continue till the condition is true. So I say while a less than 20. And I can print a. And I can increment it. Let's increment by 2. Okay. Okay. Now, last time we tried to run all our programs via the command line, right? Now let's try to see how we can implement or basically make use of the PyCharm IDE. So that's also pretty simple. So you can do a right click on your editor, and you will see a line called run space your file name. Okay. Is there anybody who didn't find this option? Okay, let's try this. So you can see when you did that, you can see the output below, and you can also see there is a, on top of your screen, you can see something called as your, I cannot zoom in here. So you should see the file name in a drop down on your top of your IDE. Like this. Okay. So the good thing is like you don't have to do this every time. So people who have already used some other IDEs like Eclipse or Visual Studio might be already familiar of this feature. So for those people who are new to the IDEs, this will be a new concept. So that means this is like if you make any changes, okay, you don't have to right click and run again. You can just press the play button next to the drop down. So it will run it. Is it clear? Okay. Okay. And is there any doubt on the while loop? It's a pretty simple loop. So I don't see any complications there. So it's pretty straightforward. You have a condition and you have to make sure like you have a condition where this condition is false and it exits. Otherwise, for people who are familiar, it will turn into an infinite loop. Okay. So infinite loop is nothing but it just keep on, it will never exit out of your program unless you terminate it. Okay. And conditions where you really need an infinite loop, you can put a statement like while true. Okay. So this is an infinite loop in Python. Okay. So that means like this is a constant and it is never going to change. What that means is like this loop will never exit. Okay. Now, since we are already on loop and it's not pretty much interesting, let's make it a little bit interesting with maybe printing some random numbers. Okay. Now, till now, we haven't used any of the Python modules. So this will be a new thing. So we have so many inbuilt modules in Python. That means like without adding any Python files or downloading anything, you have so many inbuilt packages. And one of the inbuilt package is something called as a random. Now the statement is import, okay, and your package name. Okay. Can everybody try it and see if you are getting an error or you are already getting like a gray string? Is everyone able to write the statement? Okay. Now you can see like something is shown in gray color, right? So the gray color shows that it is never used. Okay. So it is always good when you are actually writing bigger programs so that you can make sure your memory is not wasted. So that's like you can always exclude the ones which are in gray. That means like they are never used in your file. Okay. Now to print a random number, and one more thing is like there is no requirement that your import statement should be top of your file. Yes, it is a standard that you have to put in top of your file, but you can always scope it as well. So that means like, even if you put this statement like here, it will work. Okay. It's not like other programming language where you can only import in top of your file. Okay. That's one more learning. Now, random usage is pretty simple. You can say, there are multiple functions, but one of the mostly useful one is getting a random int. And you can see put a like a starting number and a ending number. And this will give you a number between 0 and 10. Okay. So what we are trying to do is like, let's bring some random numbers. And if whenever we get a random number which is greater than 8, we will exit. Okay. Now exiting a statement loop, whether it's a while loop or a for loop, we can use the statement called break. Okay. So we don't need this. Let's run it. So you can see like this time I only got the output as 9. Okay, and it met the condition that is greater than 8, and it breaked out of the loop. Okay, so let's try it again. So you can see this time instead of 1 output, I got like around 6 outputs. Okay, so in this case, while loop is really good. It won't work with for loop because we need a the end conditions is not defined here. We don't know like after how many iterations the number will be greater than 8. So in such conditions, we use while loop, right? Is it clear? So, okay, so we are done with the loops here, and let's start with a new topic for today's program. Okay, so let's start with the comprehension. Okay, so this is a little bit a new feature for you, and it's a very useful function for handling the collections in Python. So let's see what is a comprehension and what are the usage. So it's basically filtering the collection. Okay, so filtering is like if you have a bigger loop, or if you want to create a random loop, you can use a comprehension. So you can see like where you can use the comprehension. It can be used in a set, list, or a dictionary. Okay. So I know this might be like a theoretically it doesn't mean much to you. So let's see how it works practically. So I'm going to create a new file.
Shan, sorry to interrupt. Can you just zoom the window a little bit? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Sounds good.
I guess it's visible now.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. Great. So let's see. So let's try to create a simple list. Okay. Now, what I want to do is filter out or maybe process the list. Like based on this list, I want to create a new list. Okay. Let's start with a simple one. For example, I want to create another list, which is like a addition of, let's say, the number 2. Okay. So what I'm going to do is like, let's try to implement the same in a for loop. So I'm saying my list 2. I'm creating an empty list and I'm writing a for loop. And I'm saying I'm appending I plus 2. And finally, I am printing the list 2. Is the program clear? I'm just iterating my first list, adding 2 to each of the elements, and the new list is actually created for the variable mylist2. Okay. So let's try to see the output. I hope you can see the output. Right. Let me know if you are able to get the output. Can I get some responses, please? Did you got the output? Okay. Okay. I can see some responses. Okay. Now let it be here and let's try to use comprehension to get the same output. Okay. So what I'm going to do is like I'm creating a my list 3. And what we are trying to do is first is like we are operating on a list. So we call this as a list comprehension. And list comprehension start with how we create a list. That is a square brackets. And inside the square bracket, what we are going to write, okay, is a first let's start with a loop inside the square. So we are going to write for, let's say, I in my list. Okay. And this is your center of your comprehension. And in the right side, you can write your conditions. Okay. But let's try to implement the same thing what we have created. So in the left side, you can write the processing part. So for example, what we are doing is like I plus 2, right? And that's it. Now let's try to print my list 3. And run again. You can see what I wrote in like 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. I've actually rewritten it in, sorry, the 3 lines I've rewritten in 1 line. And this is really a powerful feature, okay, because it can be nested as well. Okay, that means like you can write like this as well. Okay, and you can nest it as much as possible. So that means like every time you are nesting it, you are actually reducing that many number of lines. So this is one of another reason why our Python codes are actually less in lines of code compared to other languages. Clear? Okay, I take it as a yes. And let's move on. So before we get into the dictionary comprehension, we have one more feature to say, that is called the tuple unpacking. Okay, that means like if you have a tuple or a list, you can actually unpack into multiple variables. So for example, let's say I have a tuple called x and I have values like 3. Now this is a one variable, right? Now you can unpack this into multiple variables. For example, I can say a comma b comma c equal to x. Sorry. Let's start with the basic. Okay, and this is same as how you do it without brackets as well. Hope you remember that from your previous lesson, right? And but this is called a unpacking of the list or any collection. Now, where this is useful is when you are iterating with objects of like a list of list or list of tuples. So let's, without creating much confusion here, let's try it with an example. For example, I'm creating a dictionary. Let's say map equal. Now, if I want to get the items, okay, or what are the elements in the my dictionary, you can have a function called items. So if I try to do like a my map dot items, you will actually get a list of tuples. And let's instead of putting in a print statement, let's put it in a for loop. So I can say for I in my map dot items, and let's try to print I. So you can see instead of printing a one line, you are getting multiple elements. And each element is a tuple with two elements, that is a key and a value. Right? Now let's say I want to print these separately. That means like instead of one variable, I want to get in a two variables. That is one variable for key and one variable for the value. So what you can do is like, instead of putting a one variable here, you can actually do a two variable. So let's say right? Just a quick check here. Are you guys up to speed, or do you need me to slow down a bit? Anyone? Okay, so I guess everybody is with me. So let's try to print it. So you can see, instead of getting a one tuple here, I have unpacked it. Okay. Now unpacking has only one condition: your left side and right side should be same. That means, like, if your one element is containing two items, you should have two variables also to get the assignment. If the conditions are not met, you will get an error. That is called an unpacking error. You will say, like, too many elements to unpack. Okay, great. So why I came to here is to get the main concepts here for the dictionary comprehension. So unless you are doing with a list, you have to handle two variables here. That is a key and a value. So let's try to manipulate the values, okay, or try to create a new dictionary using a dictionary comprehension. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, like, IMAP2, and it's same as your list comprehension, but you have to provide two values, that is a key and a value. Okay. So it also starts with a for loop, but instead of one value, we can work with two values as well here. So it's not necessary, but it's always most widely used. So I say key value. Items. Okay. Now you have to provide key and value. So let's try to provide a key and value with the same thing. So what we are going to do is, like, I'm going to use the key, but instead of value, I'm to try to do some manipulations. So let's say key will be seen. Instead of value, let's manipulate a few things. I think okay. Now let's try to print our new map. Did everybody got the output like this? So I see somebody is having a string error. I'm sorry, I cannot. If you can paste it on your. Okay, great. You got it. Okay. So you can see how we manipulate with a dictionary. You can also, I mean, like with a list, you can also do with a dictionary. Okay. And it can be done with a tuple as well, or a list as or a set as well. Clear? I know it seems pretty simple, but once you start using it, it actually saves a lot of code. Can we move on? Okay. So let's get back to our slides. And the next, or the most, another very useful thing is methods or functions, however you call it. And we can see like methods. It's a pretty simple to define methods in Python. It just use a keyword called def. And the things to learn about methods is like mainly the argument types. You have different types of arguments in Python. Okay. It's not really necessary you use everything, because for most of the regular use, you will be using basically the args and quarks. The KW args are known as like keyword arguments. Okay, and these are the normal arguments. So I believe everybody knows the what is a method. It's just like a reusable piece of code. Okay. So I'm not spending much time to explain what is a method. So I'm going straight to the practical. So let's create a new file. Okay, this is for methods. So we have already knowingly or unknowingly have used already built-in methods or functions, right? Just a memory check here. Can you guys comment the functions which we have used, any of the functions or methods in the chat, please? Any functions which you remember from today's exercise? Or okay, I have started seeing some functions. Okay, great. So sum and range, everybody remember. So we have also used randint today, right? Okay, random is not a function; it's a package. So randint is a function. Okay. So let's see how we can create our functions. Okay. So let's start with a simple functions of addition. So let's say add, and the syntax is pretty simple. It starts with a keyword def, your function name, and your arguments. Let's say a comma b. Okay. And a statement can a function can return a value or cannot return a value. Okay. And a function doesn't return a value, always returns null or none. Okay. So let's create like a empty function. Let's say pass. Okay. Okay. So I think I haven't explained what is a pass. So pass is like a placeholder function or a keyword. So that means like if you don't put anything here, you will get an error. Okay, because it is expecting some statement inside a function. But if you don't want to put anything, you can just put pass. So it will just ask the interpreter to skip the line. Okay. Now let's try to print add. Okay. And let's see if it works or not. You can see it has printed none because the function is not returning anything. Okay. You can also get into a variable as well. So I can see, let's see. And I can check here. Result. Yeah. So these are the things which you have already learned. So we are using a is operator to see like the result is none. If it is none, it will say no result. Otherwise, it will print the result. Okay. So let's run it again. So you can see it says no result because our value is none. So this is a null check in your Python. So now let's implement it. So what I'm going to do is like the statement keyword is called return. If you want to return anything, I say a plus b. Now try to run it again. So you can see this time we got the result. Is it clear? Okay, now let's come to a little bit interesting part. So you can accept any type of variable and you can also return any type of variable in Python because there is no defined types in Python. It's everything are objects, right? So that means like I can also return a list or a tuple, right? So let's do this. Instead of putting like this, what I'm going to do is like return a list. Okay. Now let's try to get the result. So you can see here, I got a list instead, right? So you might be wondering like, okay, what's the interesting part here, right? So we will be there in a bit. So you can see there are two values. And what we have learned in a while earlier is like you can unpack it, right? If you remember. So that means I can return multiple values. Let's say okay, and not necessarily you have to put it in a list. You can just put commas as well. Can you see? So this is a very powerful feature where your function can return multiple values because most of the programming languages we have known, you can actually return only one value, right? Is it clear? Did everybody got the output? Oh, okay. Now, second thing is like we have already got the concept in the previous session, but let's try to see. So we have already mentioned in the previous class, like we can as a variable doesn't have a type, right? Now, so that means like any data or any value can be assigned to any variable. Now let's see if we can go beyond the variables or values. So what I'm going to do is handle functions as if it were variables. So instead of assigning like this one, I am going to do assign a function. So I'm saying add2 is a variable and I'm going to assign add without the brackets. And let's do one more thing. let's print. And run it again. Can you see? I have used the variable as if I were using I have used the method as if I were assigning a variable, right? Is it clear? Okay, in between I got a question like if you return two values, will the default return value type is tuple? Yes, I mean like unless you explicitly put as like a list or something, if you just put like a comma and this one, it is a tuple. Okay, did everybody got the output for this one? Okay, now this is actually opening up a window of opportunities for us. So you have got like you can assign the values, right? So it also means like you can pass the function as values as well. So let's try to do this. You have two functions. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is like going to call the second function and pass the first function. Are you guys with me? Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm invoking this function and passing the variable or as an argument, I'm passing the first function. And inside the second function, I'm calling the whatever function is passed with the variable. So let's try if this works. It worked, right? Please let me know if you guys got it. Great. Okay. Now let's, so this is a basic concept. That means like you can assign anything to anywhere. And one more thing to really, really note while you're doing, you have already seen like there are multiple built-in functions, right? Which you don't have to import. For example, let's say sum, right? Sum is an inbuilt function. So if I do like a print sum of 1, 2, you're getting output, right? Now, unlike most of the other programming languages, there is no restriction to use the reserved keywords in Python. That means you can see sum is already reserved, but I can also say, let's define one more function like this. And okay, here you can see it is accepting a list. So let's try this. I can say sum equal to add. Now if I do, let's modify a bit. And run it again. you can see we have overridden the inbuilt functions with the our function. Did you got the concept? So always be careful what keywords are you are using, because Python will not throw you an error. Okay. But you can use this as like a, so for example, you can put this as like a context switching. So for example, let's say for a bunch of lines, you don't want your sum to behave like this. So what you can do is like you can back up this one. So for example, I am saying equal to sum. And after you used it, you can revert it. Like this. You cannot, if you don't do this, you cannot revert it till your end time of your file. It's same as your variables. If you don't explicitly revert it, it won't revert it by itself, right? So if you are knowing, if you know what you are doing, so make sure to take a backup. Okay. Otherwise, never use the defined keywords. And you don't have to bother too much unless you use it. So for example, in this case, I'm not going to use the sum if I'm not going to use, or for example, div mod or any other function which I'm not going to use. You don't have to worry about its usage. Okay. So what it actually helps you to like, if you are bound to these kind of reserved keywords, the problem is like sometimes we have to use because it actually reduces the readability if you are going to get a synonym for a reserved keyword. For example, sum is something which we commonly use variable, right? And if I'm not going to use the built-in function, there is no harm in actually overriding this function or using this variable. So that is the main reason Python has removed that restriction. Is it clear? Can I get some response, please? Okay. So let's look for keyword arguments, and then we can break for 5 minutes. Okay. So let's cover the keyword arguments. So we have already seen what is a argument. So that's a commonly known thing, right? A equal A and B, right? Now let's create another function. I am clearing this file. You don't have to really. So we have already seen the how we can use this. We can swap the variables, right? Now let's write our own swap function. So, or let's say instead of swap, let's say subtract function. Okay. Because addition, it doesn't matter which position it is. Now, if I'm printing okay, so what is the answer here? What do you think the output will be? Can you just put it in chats? 3. Okay. Right? Now let's change the variables. Now what will be the answer? Can somebody put in the chat, please? Okay. It's -3. Now, so what this we have proved is like the arguments work in the way it is given in the while invoking the function. That means everything depends on the order in which the variables are passed, right? So let's say if you want to switch it, okay? instead of by maintaining the order. I don't want to change the order, but I want to a result of a positive value or like a instead of a, it regardless of the order, it should go to the variable a. So here what you can use is the keyword arguments. So if you know the argument name of the function, you can always pass that or address that variable like this. Okay. So let's try to print again. You can see the result is now 3. Is it clear? Okay. Now one thing to note here is like you can combine a keyword arguments and arguments. For example, if I'm putting C, like this. So what I can do is like I can call like 5. Then I can say like B equal to 10 and C equal to, let's say, like this I can call. So that means like it's a combination of a normal arguments and keyword arguments, right? So you can get the values, but you cannot do in the reverse order. Like you cannot say like B equal to 5 and comma 3. It will give you an error. I hope everybody got the reason why. Because your argument depends on the order. You cannot have an argument after keyword arguments because the order is lost. The Python doesn't know like which variable to assign this. So always make sure like if you are using a combination, your arguments should come first. Clear? Okay, so I think it's been an hour. So let's take a break for 5 minutes. Okay, and let's get back by 12:05. Okay, in between, if you have any queries or anything, please comment. I'll try to answer. Okay, so see you after 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Okay, I see a question from one of a person from YouTube. So you're getting a backup error. So make sure you do a backup equal to sum before. So you have to make sure you have a value here like this before doing a sum equal to backup. The reason is like you have to first make sure this variable is defined. If you just try to do like this, you will get an error. Okay, I see one more question like how can we print inside a loop that comes in a same line? No, you are not supposed to do that. The reason is like you can join it. Okay, you can concatenate and print it later, but every print statement you invoke creates a new line. Okay, you can append that your values to a variable outside the loop, and you can print it after the loop. Okay, so you get in a one line, but you don't have to. If you are printing it inside a loop, it will be always multiple lines. Okay, I'm seeing one more question about the output string formatting. Yes, so to be honest, like I don't remember on top of my head, but yes, you can have like same as you do in C and all. You can always there are some ANSI escape sequences which you can use. Okay, probably you can Google it. Okay, it's because this is not something which is widely used, but yes, it is possible. It's not specific to Python. It's more specific to like how the shell operates. Okay, I just did a quick Google, so let's see if it says true. Is it bold? Yeah, looks a bold earlier than it, but I think all the statements are like similar. Okay, I think we have to do a little bit more research. Okay, I'm seeing few more questions. So, what are the advantages of using tuple? So, okay, I think you have missed our previous class. So, tuple is mainly a immutable list. That means like if you want your values not to be modified, you use a tuple. Okay, for instance, like this and you don't want your values because it is fixed. Okay, you don't want this to be changed outside, right? So in this kind of cases, you use tuple. Okay, and I can see like one more is like how can we see the different functions in a built-in package? So if you are using an ID, it's pretty simple. For example, if I'm using like a import random, if you just put like a random dot, you can see all the functions and attributes in the dropdown. Okay. Or if you are using a command shell, you can also use like a import random. Let's see. It depends on the documentation. You can see like a help of random. You can see the documentation if you type like help of random in the Python shell. I hope I answered your question. Okay, I see a question like about the series. So we are going to cover, or I would say touch base, a Django-based, a web-based framework called Django. But we are not here to compare anything, any other framework or suggest anything, because uh, it's a very generic thing. When you say like a Python-based framework, okay, because you have multiple frameworks and everything has its own pros and cons, and everything is specific. Okay, so a framework is very generic to answer your question.
Hi all, we'll start in another 1 minute.
Okay, I think we can start. It's sharp 12:10. So I hope everybody is back. And please note that like we have a hard stop at 12:30. So the remaining portions which is not covered as part of today will be covered in the next session. Okay. So let's resume. So we have seen what is a argument and what is a keyword argument, right? Now let's go to what is called as a default argument. So we are going to use the same function now, but we are trying to get a default. So for example, here, for C, or let's say I'm putting like a argument like message, and I can assign a value in the function definition itself. So I can say default message. So what this will do is like, let's try to call this. I'm saying, let's here itself. I'm not returning anything. Instead, I'm printing it here. I'm invoking the function with variables like 5. And I'm again invoking the same function with the 3 arguments. Okay. Is it clear what we have done here? So we have defined a default value. So that means like your function will not throw any error if you are not passing the message which has already have values. Okay. So if I run it, you can see when we have invoked the function with the two values, it printed the default message. But when we pass the third value, it has been overridden. Is it clear? Can I get some responses, please, so that I can know like you are getting it? Okay, clear. Thank you. So you might have remember our functions which we have used like range and everything, right? And you can see like sometimes we pass 2 variables and sometimes we pass 3 variables, right? So you can implement such functions like this, right? And here also you have to note that like your default or the arguments which has default values should come to the last. You cannot have like a default value in like this, or it is not a standard way. So you can say like you cannot have this, because the thing is like you can omit the last words. Okay, you can say like, okay, if the third variable is optional, yes, you can skip it, but you cannot have like a first one as optional and second one as uh, mandatory. It doesn't make sense, right? So make sure all your default variables are coming after your mandatory variables. You can have everything as the default, so that's not a problem. Okay, but you cannot, if you are mixing it, you have to make sure like it comes after the mandatory variables. Is it clear? Okay. Now we have something called as arbitrary arguments, okay, or arbitrary keyword arguments as well. So if you guys have already studied in C or something, we have something called as a variable arguments or var args, which is I like, if you don't know like how many number of arguments you are going to get or how many keyword arguments you are going to get, you can use this. So for example, your print functions, do you know how many variables it can take? No, right? How many how many variables you are going to give it to print? It will print everything, right? So let's try to implement our own print function, right? Or we can use the print function as a inside for implementation. But what we are going to do is, let's say instead of print, let's say show. sorry. Okay. So you can say like args. Just note the star here. Now what we are going to do is like, I'm going to loop through it. So let's say hi. Right. Now let's try. So I can say show one. Or I can also do a try to pass a list, right? Let's keep it simple here, right? Run it. So did you saw that? This is for the first one, second one, and the third one. Is it clear? So in this case, we don't know how many arguments we can expect. So that's why we have the arbitrary arguments. You can also have a keyword arguments as well. Okay. So it's not going to be a very different. So I'm just skipping the keyword arguments. It's because it's just like instead of a star, you can put like keyword arguments. Okay. Or you can also use like a v. But yeah, keyword arguments is not something which you regularly use. It will be like args, like how we have used show. Is it clear? Can we move on? Okay, because we are stopping the methods here. We are done with the methods. So please let me know if you have any queries for the methods. Okay, so I don't see any native answers. So let's move on. So we will have let's start a bit of classes. Then let's see how we can cover during the time frame. Okay, so class. So this is like just a theoretical, like what is a class. So I'm not going to cover the object-oriented concepts because that is like a different topic. But I assume like everybody has a brief idea like what are objects and the basic properties of a class. Right? So as you can see, like yeah, even though Python is object-oriented language, it doesn't enforce you to use the class concept. Okay, but you can use class. So classes is basically, by definition, it actually encapsulates the functions and variables together, or methods or attributes together. Then what we have to see is a scope. That is like what is the scope of variables inside a Python class. Constructor and destructor. You really don't have to worry about destructor much. The reason is like unlike C++, where you have to explicitly deallocate the memory, Python is same as Java. It has its own garbage collector, and the del is only invoked when the garbage collector kicks in, or basically if you are deleting a variable. Okay. Then you have the basic class methods. You have attributes. That is like basically the class variables. Then you have inheritance. That's like getting a subclass out of a parent class. You have access modifiers. you really don't have something like called as like a protected as such in Python. It's basically how you use it. Then you have something called as a property. Okay, it might be a new. Okay, so don't worry about the whatever listed here. We will be going through each one of them. Okay. Okay, so let's start it. So slide is just for an overview. So don't worry much about the slides. Okay, so let's start with a new file. Okay, so let's start with a new class. So I'm saying the keyword is class and your class name. Let's start with something basic. Let's start with a animal class.
Sean, can you just zoom the screen once?
Oh, sorry for that. Good now?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay,
Please
sorry,
carry on.
the Zoom always resets on the new file.
Cool.
Okay. Okay, so let's start with the basic. So you have a class, and as you've seen, there is no explicit requirement for you to define a variable. So if you want an attribute, you are actually defining the attribute in your constructor. And let's jump into constructor here, because it is something which every class has. Because in Python, you define the variables also inside the constructor. So the syntax is pretty simple. You say def, it's a function, and every constructor has a defined or a reserved keyword that is init. So you have an underscore underscore init underscore underscore. Okay, and this is defined. You shouldn't use this for anything else. Now you can say like initialize your variables like this. So I can say like self dot name like this. I can say is like also put another arguments, for example, color. I can say self color equal to color. Okay. So you can see that I don't have to define it outside the class. You can do the outside the class, but we will cover that why you shouldn't do that, or you should be knowing like when you're doing it how what happens. Okay. So you have this. Now to create a object, it's also pretty simple. I can say cat equal to animal. It's same as like how you invoke a function. Okay, but you will be invoking the constructor function, right? So I can say great. Now I can access the variables like cat dot name, cat dot color. Okay, that means like when you are creating an animal, and if you say like self dot name in your any of your init function, it is actually initialized. Can everybody write this piece of code in your editor, please? Let me know if it is done. Okay, so let's try to run it. This is Okay. Now, okay. So you can create multiple number of classes here. Okay. Now let's see a simple thing here. I think we are running out of time, so I think we will discuss the advanced topics of or the remaining topics of class in the next session. But let's reiterate one more learning what we have learned for the methods. So in methods, we have learned like we can pass anything to a function, right? So that also includes class as well. Okay. So let's see how it works. So I'm defining a method, create. I'm saying my class. And what I'm trying to do is like, I'm creating a list and I'm saying for I in I'm saying I'm going to create a class objects with the any class which I'm given. So I'm saying my class of I. That's all we need, right? And I can return my list. So let's try to call that. So I'm saying for new class of, let's say, uh, in create. Is it clear so far what we are trying to do? So this is just to illustrate that you can pass even a class as a variable. We are not passing an object. Okay, just note down the difference. We are not passing a instance of animal, but we are passing the class itself. And if I run, you can see it is created. So what we got as after calling the create function is a list of animals. Is it clear? Okay. So I'm sorry for today because we didn't cover too much of class, so that the assignments will be what I planned in my mind was actually with all the concepts of class. So I think with the current learning, I don't think you it might be a little bit tough for you. Uh, but let's try to do it on the next class. So I would say like please try out on your own, maybe like create different classes. Okay, and maybe different constructors. And also there is it's similar to create a method like this. So you know like how to create a method. So the signature for any method is same as your constructor. So if I want to create like def, let's say run, only requirement is your first keyword should be self. So self is like your, yeah, this keyword in your Java. It represents its own class. So I can say print self dot color like this. Okay. I can see. Like this you can define. Okay. Is it clear? Okay. So guys, so I think I'm just getting to like know the pace of the program. So sorry for that. That's the why we are having a little bit of spillover. But I hope at least everybody is understanding what we have covered so far, because that is what matters. Okay. Uh, okay, guys. So we will be covering the remaining of the today's concept. So let's just go through like what you can expect in the next class. So what we had in the next class is like basically what is MVC, the Django concepts and terminologies, and basically starting up with a basic web page. Okay. Just bear in mind, like I'm not going to include any HTML sessions or anything. So it will be like a plain basically on the Python and Django aspects. So I hope everybody has like a very basic idea of how HTML looks like. Okay. And we'll be covering the remaining of today's class concepts. I don't think there is too much to cover, but we will have it on the next session. And just a quick poll here. Is it okay if we can have the next session by 2 hours? It's just a ask because I don't want everybody to get bored or like having it something over the head. If everybody is okay, and I believe like it will be the same audience for the next time. So I'm just asking for a suggestion. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm getting a very positive response for 2 hours. So let's have it for 2 hours next day so we can cover today's spillover as well as the next day program. Okay. So thank you for your patience and happy learning. So make sure you apply whatever you have learned, because there is like a lot of things you can do with Python with whatever you have learned so far. Okay, and the only concept we have missing is like the rest of the class function. Okay, so thank you and enjoy your weekend. John, you have any closing remarks?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Shan, for this wonderful session. Hope we all good with the topics that we discussed today. Right? We are good, right? Okay. So we'll continue the session on next weekend, as Shanu said. Like we will plan for 2 hours. Hope you all be okay with that. And thank you, Praditani, for this platform. So a big thank you from Team Obscura Zone. So see you on next weekend, next Saturday. Stay safe. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.